Welcome to another Mother Fiction Writers podcast. I'm Stevie. Again, Stacy isn't here all month of June, but I have Amanda here and she's with me and I'm so excited. And that's another thing too with like, I know you plan, okay, let's actually jump into this. You plan on traditional publishing, right? That's your goal. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that is the goal I've currently set my sights on. And I've always said that I'm open to indie publishing. I do want to attempt this avenue first though.
Right.
And I have been saying for years that I'm going to query Library of Souls, and I always chicken out. It's something that I just never quite like. I even went so far last year to build a whole spreadsheet and to be like, okay, this agent is looking for this. I think I'd be a good fit. I should send them my query letter. I have like 15 drafts of the query letter done, and I still just couldn't do it. I was just so terrified to like hand this, my baby of a novel over to someone.
You always hear those stories that you're going to get rejected like 100 times before you get any yeses or even maybes and stuff. So that, is there a little bit of that kind of fear of that first rejection?
Oh, for sure.
Hopefully, maybe it won't happen for you. Maybe, I send you all the good vibes that it won't take forever. But is there some of that weight on there though too?
I think so. And I'm trying to think of it more like a rite of passage of like all of us have to go through this because that's just the nature of the industry.
It's just like bad reviews, yeah, they're going to be there.
And there's so many agents versus, or there's so many of us versus how many agents there are to help us find publishers and different things like that. And they're, and I know that there are different like pros and cons for the big five that you still might maybe have to market for yourself a little bit, even if you are traditionally published. But it's been one of those like childhood goals that I just have to see through. And it truly wasn't until I don't even remember how many months ago it was now. I think it was right after January. I think I had just started the fix, so it had to have been like February timeframe. But I found someone here on Bookstagram, and I actually don't fully know how to pronounce her name, so I'm so sorry if I mispronounced this, but I think it's Cheyenne McKinnon. And she was offering up it was a contest that you could enter to see if she would take you on as her first client for her practicum. And she needed someone with a manuscript that was like pretty polished, wasn't like in the drafting phase of still, and preferably pretty much ready to query right at that time. And I was like, this might be the push I need. And
this is me. It's me.
Yeah. I took a chance and she picked me, and I'm so honored that she did. And we have been she had a couple great critiques for me. She's the one who helped me figure out that this should maybe be an NA instead of a YA, which I wrote Library of Souls back when YA was a huge booming industry, and it still is, but I didn't even know that NA existed then. And
so it really didn't. It was kind of like SJM and JLA who kind of broke those barriers, kind of opened that up.
Absolutely. And this story definitely touched, like the characters are kind of younger, but I've aged them up, but it touches on a lot of really adult topics. So it makes more sense for it to be NA. And I'm still not convinced I'm going to write Spice for it, even though that might be expected now. But,
necessarily.
So like no.
I mean, because it's just like an adult fantasy or an adult anything too. It's not like Spice is expected in every single book. It is there. That's why it's adult or whatever. But it's not in every single book. There's so many books that this doesn't even exist. So
that's very true. I have to keep that in mind. I'm on Bookstagram. I'm on the spicy side of Bookstagram. So
I know it's everywhere.
Perspective. So we went. She's been helping me. So we went down that route if she had some suggestions for the overall manuscript. And then so I had a query letter drafted, but I had no idea that I also needed to draft a synopsis letter. And I think maybe also a blurb. And the synopsis letter is basically, oh, you wrote 100,000 words? Great. Can you tell me all of the plot points and the internal and external motivations of your main character in 2 pages or less? Double space.
Yeah. Like, no, I really cannot do that, but let me see if I can try.
It has definitely been one of the hardest writing experiences of my life, and Cheyenne has been fantastic with coaching me and guiding me through the process. And you know, we got it to a point where it was 2 pages in like version 2, and then we had to expand it to 4 pages because I had done it to the bare bones without any motivation involved. And so it's been a very intensive process, but it's also been so eye-opening and so great to have just.
So are you the only one she's working with though, then? Is it just you and her?
I'm not positive. I think she is currently working on like a degree, and she might kind of be graduating recently or soon. So I imagine she'll be taking on more clients soon.
Yeah.
But I would definitely highly.
Well, I just think that's like really personable. I think that's really cool, is why I asked. Yeah. That's really neat.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, and so I think I just needed someone in my corner when I started querying. So that I think was the best gift I could have asked for from the universe.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's all coming together for you. I can see it. I can feel it. It's a good year for you. Yeah.
I hope so. Last year was not my year. Hopefully this year is my year.
This is your year. This will be it. I have a feeling. I mean, come on. I know you wrote the one book. I mean, did you end it? You ended it in December, right? You finished About in Bleeding Heart in December.
I finished it in November, I think. I think it was like
okay. It was November. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was the start of your good luck.
Yes. I will say that was probably the good thing that happened last year was that book.
That's where I love that. And then, so with the querying and all that, so you're doing the synopsis now, and then what's kind of the plan from there is?
I have, so I've drafted a query letter, but I need to give her, I need to kind of revamp it now and then give her the updated query letter. And then we're going to go through a couple different versions of that until we're happy with it. And then part of the benefit of this is she has been tailoring a list of agents that would fit me and fit the story. And I think 10 or somewhere in that ballpark, that I can then reach out to at the end of this process with my polished, pieces. And sometimes they ask for the first 10 pages of a manuscript, or sometimes they ask for the first chapter, different things like that. And so I've also I had no idea that I was formatting it incorrectly either, and so she guided me through that
formatting
process.
Is so confusing. It can be
very confusing. So I hopefully the end of this will have, not hopefully, I will at the end of this have the query letter, the synopsis, and then a polished manuscript to hand over to an agent for hopefully and hopefully 10 of them, and hopefully one of them will bite. That's the goal.
Fingers crossed. I'm rooting for you. I can see it happening. Because that's another one. So the one that you're planning on doing the querying for and that you're working on this is a sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
So I love that you have all these different kind of, each one of yours is a little bit of a dabble into something else, That's really cool. That's a good way to just keep your creativity fresh. And then 2, it's a good way to just kind of not really, I don't know if niche is the right word, but kind of not really get stuck in certain category, You kind of
I totally understand.
Bounce around.
You don't want to get known as the author who only writes rom-coms or only writes fantasy if you want to branch out and write tons of different things. Definitely.
And some people they do just want to write one thing, and that's great. But it is nice to kind of, because I would like to dive into sci-fi a little bit more. And honestly, I never thought I was a romance writer. I knew I would always have some spice in there, but I didn't think that romance would be my forte or anything like that at all. It was always more like epic quests and deep fantasy. That was more world building was what I always did. Like growing up and stuff like that. And again, there would be like couples or like people who were together, maybe some spicy scenes and stuff like that. But now I've just kind of really like opened up into multiple different kinds of romances because
you have.
And it's been fun though, you know, because there is a different there's just so many different like subcategories and stuff that you can jump into. And I really, really love that they are doing, you can write like a quest fantasy.
Yeah.
Have that spice in there still, you know. Obviously you don't want to have it take over because then that's not there. But I do like that. I find that very fun. And again, I don't want to be like categorized as somebody the other day was like, oh, you're a romance writer. And I'm like, not really a romance writer, but there is always aspects of romance in my storylines, you know, and stuff. So
which it makes so much sense because if you're writing the stories about life has romance in it. Like you can't, I personally feel like you need romance in stories, you know, but I totally lost my train of thought there, but yes.
No, I do that all the time. No worries. No, but like, and even like romance, you don't have to deep dive into spice. It doesn't have to be there. Obviously, Bookstagram is all over, TikTok is all over it and stuff. But I definitely have found it. I've always been kind of not really like a sexual person, but like I've always been someone who has been open about that kind of stuff. I'm not really very shy about that. And so there is something that's very freeing to me to write it and finally put it out there. Because I think because I did have that in my stories and it was like fantasy type, I was almost afraid to do that because I was like, fantasy writers are going to be like, or fantasy readers are going to be like, you don't put that in fantasy, you know, like that kind of stuff. It scared me for a while. But so I'm glad that we're seeing that a little bit more. And you just recently started diving into some spice yourself.
yes, I have. And so you had mentioned that like Lord of the Rings, and did you say George R. R. Martin was kind of like you're getting back into reading after your hiatus?
So actually it was the House of Night series here, which is more, it's a YA, but it's like vampire and there's some for YA.
Okay.
There's some spice in there. I mean, obviously it's not super, but I remember being like, whoa, okay. Because this is like, you're talking Twilight-esque, I think, when they originally came out. But I didn't read them until, I don't know, 2017, 2018, something like that. That's when I really got back into reading. And there's 14 of these books. Highly recommend them if you need something to get addicted to and have characters that you love. But I read all 14 books in like 2 months. And it was, and I just haven't stopped reading since.
I love that. I love that so much. My hiatus personally came from college. I was reading so many like, you know, fiction or nonfiction texts and diving into the theory of communication, and it was all really heavy and it was like required, and I think for me that killed my creativity. So when I would want to write or read, I would choose to write because that was the better avenue for me to like keep my mind healthy. And so I took a huge break from reading for a long time. And I had dabbled in audiobooks here and there for long trips and different things. But I think ACOTAR was absolutely my like first thing that drew me back in. And I picked up, like, I think I listened to the first book on audiobook, and then I like absolutely had to go buy the second and the third books immediately after in like physical paper copies because I devoured them. I read them so quickly. And that had not happened to me since I was like a kid. And it was this, you know, fantastic thing. And to tie back into the spice, I think that was also the first time that I had read a fantasy like that was slow burn and then paid off with spice at the end. And it was it was this whole other experience that I was like, I didn't know I
it
liked
added
this.
a little bit, whether it was even like adding, because obviously with the Agatar series, one thing that is so great is the characters within that, you know? And so I think it was great for adding developmental for those characters and really seeing them join and come together and stuff. So that
it's
was
very pivotal for their characters. Absolutely. And so, you know, kind of from there, I found more of the spicy books, and I started to realize that, like, oh, this thing that I thought was taboo and I wasn't sure I was really gonna like, I really enjoy, and that's really fun. And for me, I don't think books necessarily have to have spice, especially like, I think where I draw the line is if there's a slow burn, there needs to be an equivalent payoff at the end, whether it's spice or whether it's just really well detailed emotions or make out or something that brings them together in a way that feels final and kind of good. And so when I set out to write my NaNoWriMo project, you know, obviously Library of Souls I wrote back in you know, college and right after I graduated, and I was like, my family's gonna read this. I don't want to write spice. And they're kids. Like, it doesn't make sense to have spice in this book. But I set out to write my NaNoWriMo project, The Abandoned Bleeding Heart, knowing I wanted it to be a spicy book.
You wanted to step it up a little.
yeah. And it absolutely was a really freeing experience. But that being said, the only person who has read those spicy scenes is my best friend in real life, Elizabeth Dean, who we went to college together, and she loved them and she's always really supportive. But it, you know, it's one of those, like, only one person has read this. And I you know, going back to the fanfic again, I also did not intend to go into it writing spice for the fanfic. I had never dreamed of writing you know, spice before. And all of a sudden my readers were kind of asking for it, and it kind of felt like it was appropriate for the story. And so now I actually have written spice that people have given feedback on, and actually,
and that was it was good. Yeah,
you gave me wonderful feedback on it.
You did good. And I think you've gotten this feedback too from the comments and stuff too. You did a very good job at like making it what's the word, like, not really sensual, but like where there's the emotions, but there's also the heat and the need and stuff. You did a very good job at that. Yes.
Thank you. I definitely, and that is it's a totally different tone that, like, I intentionally, I don't know if you've read Red, White, and Royal Blue, but it's one of my favorite romances that is, like, the spice is great, but the spice is it takes a back seat to the emotions, and there's nothing really.
I've heard a lot of people talk about that one.
Yeah, and the spice is fantastic, but it definitely is not explicit the way that, like, Akatar is, or what's another one that's more explicit that I'll think of it in like 5 minutes. But it definitely, like, nothing is said outright what they're doing. It's just how they feel and how they're connected to each other. And so I knew that that's kind of how I wanted to play that more. And so I feel good about that, and that being online with my name on it.
Right. But I feel like that's almost like ripping off a Band-Aid too. Like, once you do it, it's just like, oh, people really respond. Because I could even go on further with the one that's on Vella with the Mechanical Hearts one, Yours to Take. That one was more like the characters just kind of came to me, and I really wanted to try a dabble in something that was much more spice. And I always have where there's multiple characters within my story, and like that, where I kind of wanted, this was the first one where I wanted world building and side characters, but it was the first one where I was like, I want it to mostly be about these two people who have this connection, and it's from the past and it's coming back, and they wouldn't be the type of people who would wait. So it's like right from the and I've been getting very good. That one, people have really kind of, for how much, I mean, you're talking 3 paragraphs in, it's kind of like into it already and stuff, or like it's kind of slow, but you know what's coming. and stuff. And then in chapter 3, it's coming, there's something happening again and stuff. And so it just was one of those, the characters kind of told me, like, we're not, this is a decade in the making here. We've been missing each other. Like, we're not going to wait around, you know, like that kind of thing. So that's like how it was for me. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Love that so much. It's so validating too, to like put, like, writing spice really does feel more vulnerable than writing kind of anything else, or, you know, maybe it's akin to writing something that is really deeply emotional, like, you know, we can connect to really emotionally. But having that out in the world and having decent feedback on that is really validating and encouraging. I will say that the spice I wrote for A Bound and Bleeding Heart leaves very little to the imagination. So it's a very different vibe.
Okay, I'm here for that.
Yeah, it's a very different vibe, and we'll see how I feel about it after having, like, because at this point I set it down in probably December. So it'll be interesting to pick it back up and be like, oh, I wrote that? Oh, wow. To be like, oh no, that's the right vibe.
Oh, I bet it will, because once you dive back into that, like I always feel it really is. It's like your characters kind of tell you how far they want to take things and stuff.
They do.
Because also, like the one that you've read, there's it's a why choose, and there was something that I wrote like last Friday, and it almost took it too far too soon. And I was like, so I remember it being on my, almost like my character in my head, like Brim, was like, no, this is too fast. This would not happen yet. You need to tone it down. This is coming later.
He would be the one to slow it down too.
Yeah, he'd be the one that's like, I've got other things to focus on right now. I've got my own little tricks up my sleeve. So I had to go in and rewrite that, because I was like, okay, you're right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
So speaking of characters, so last time Allie was on, and she had a great question, which was, what comes first? Is it your characters or your plot? And does it change her book?
Oh, how interesting.
Right? It's like something you don't think about right off the bat until you have to think about it.
Yeah. I would say, for the most part, for me, I think my characters come first, and like their mindset and how they tackle things in the world.
Gotcha.
And then seeing the world through their eyes is kind of what helps me figure out the plot.
The plot. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
What about you?
For me, it is usually a scene. It just builds on a scene. And so it all just kind of comes together. Because I've always been a very like imaginative person. I'm the type that, like, when I'm outside, it's probably why I love nature. I'm listening to all the rustle of the leaves, the birds, the different songs that each bird is singing, the croaking of the frogs, the stream, if it's there, you know. I'm always one that's really honed in on that stuff. So that like a simple sound, like a running of the stream, or like maybe a weird car makes a backfire noise or something, and it will jumpstart my creativity, and it'll bring on a scene. And from that little scene, it'll build. So it's almost like the surrounding stuff comes first, if that makes sense, you know, like the scene.
Yeah.
What's the setting kind of a thing. And then I'll see the character sitting on a rock, or I'll see the character with a sword in hand or something, you know? And so then I'll build from there. It's fascinating. Yeah. And then from there, what I usually do is I take my phone, if it's near, or a notebook, and I will get that scene out as soon as possible. And then I kind of build on the magic, on the plot line, on the character themselves. So that's my time to plot. Like, if I'm going to plot at all, it's that first initial spark kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then I just go with it.
That is so cool. Yeah, I definitely trying to think. I think definitely it has to be the characters first for me. And it has like I have along with my journey developing my skills as an author and different things, I have also completely changed how I draft my
Yeah.
stories. So Library of Souls is actually a trilogy that I ended up like I remember I think it was my junior year of college. I was home for the summer and I had like 50 something note cards and I had them all in a circle on the floor like a frantic madman trying to figure out what had to go first for this plot to da 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 da. And now I'm
the
like,
type of thing that makes my heart be like, oh my gosh.
yeah, and it genuinely was like it worked, but it was so stressful to manage all those pieces. And it's probably one of the most solid plot lines that I have. But I have created just as solid plot lines and let my characters have way more control over their own lives and their decisions. And I feel like I truly am straight down the middle, a bit of a plantser now because I can have, and it's one of those things too, if I write it down, I'm not sure it's going to happen, but I can keep in my mind, like for A Bound and Bleeding Heart, I knew I wanted this thing to roughly happen at the end, but I wasn't sure how it was going to happen or what the circumstances were going to be. And I just kind of left it loose ended and drew my characters. I tried to just kind of herd the cats.
You tell me what's gonna get us there kind of a thing. Yeah.
And I was just kind of shepherding them along the way, but it was pretty much their decisions getting them there. And definitely had a little bit of an existential crisis when we did get there because I was like, how do I make these things all fit together?
Right.
But it was, I think being a planter is just, I think it's going to be the way forward for me personally because it allows for so much more creativity to seep in, and it takes the pressure off. And I think that's
it keeps the fun there.
Yes. Yeah. It's exactly what I loved about telling stories as a kid, which is just it's fun. It's pure and it's fun.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree with that. Because I've tried. I mean, I actually got out a binder that I had done 2 years ago, something like that. And it had still it had pages of characters and stuff like that. And each character had a different color and like that kind of stuff. But then it still had my Post-it notes in there. And they're all pushed together now, like in the pocket of the binder. But they were all there. And I just like looked at that now and I still love those characters. But that I had to put that one off to the side because it became too much for me. I just couldn't. I became too overwhelmed with like, if this doesn't exactly fit then into what I created, then I would just I'd shut down and be like, now I have to redo all this stuff that I just created this big hole, where now I'm definitely, like I said, when it comes to world building for me, I still try and have a solid like plot when it comes to like plotting and like what kind of magic system is there, who lives here, are you talking kingdoms, are you talking modern world, like that kind of stuff. I try and have a little bit of that so then I can so like when it comes to my romance fantasy that you have read some of it, that one, its world building is strictly in the human realm right now, and there is some magic and there's gods and goddesses and stuff like that. But then it builds book 2, it builds into deeper realms than the human realm and stuff like that. So I have a little bit of that plotted out, but I'm not going to really dive into because I like to sprinkle it through. I don't like to just be like, here's my world and just throw it. I like it to just kind of open itself up,
Yes. And that's exactly how it should be, in my opinion. You shouldn't be world dumping for the first, 100, 200 pages.
Yeah. Like Tolkien is great. I love Lord of the Rings. And I guess maybe this is what you were getting at. So Lord of the Rings got me back into it in high school. reading.
Oh, that's what I was remembering. Yeah.
And then I did, after having my first 2 kids, then I didn't have time to read so I read, but I wasn't like an avid reader. And that's where the House of Night, then when I had my 3rd one, shortly after that, I got into those. But Tolkien, yeah, he definitely that was the age of world dumping. That was like, let me give you a million pages on the Hobbit's lifestyle before we even get into the story.
I think I have read The Hobbit, but admittedly, I have not actually read Lord of the Rings. I do, however, know that there's at least, I don't know the accuracy of it, but the joke is that like you shouldn't spend 2 to 3 pages describing just a tree. And I think that comes from Tolkien, because he would be so descriptive in his language that he would spend, multiple pages describing one tree, which is,
it's a great book. And there's a reason why there's so many people who are like fanatics about it and stuff, because he did have that deep, I mean, you were not missing anything. You had all the details. So that is great for lovers of worlds and fantasy and stuff, but it just doesn't really fly nowadays. It really doesn't. I think we're in such a fast-paced kind of society that you don't want to spend that much time reading about what that person ate, what that creature eats all day, that stuff. So
absolutely. To me, it's like the difference between Pride and Prejudice and just a modern day rom-com, or a romance, that our attention spans have gone from here to here, and it's just
well, and even how we are, because we were talking about the romance and how like it kind of was if we're talking like our mother's era and like grandma's, they definitely had it. It was there. But it was definitely like the really taboo, and not like taboo like we know taboo, but like, it was more your cheesy, like taboo kind of stuff, where it's definitely different nowadays and ramped up. And I think it's because we as women, I guess, are not the same. Each generation changes in their own way and stuff. So
definitely.
I feel like it's spicy, I guess.
yeah. I feel like it's just become more widely accepted and widely acknowledged that like women are going to, and a lot of men, I think, are going to, read and love the spice. And I think it's become less taboo and just more mainstream. And I absolutely adore that.
I do too. I like it. I do as well. I like that it isn't, you're not shamed for, liking it and stuff. It's widely accepted, and it's just accepted to be like, hey, as humans, this is what it is, it's everywhere. So
exactly.
Do you have any questions anything else that you want to specifically go over?
Ooh, a good question. Let me look at my little notes here. Ironically, so I wrote a list of 5 questions I was going to ask you at the beginning, and I think we touched on a good bit of them.
Nice.
But
we know how to talk to each other.
I think one thing that's kind of interesting that I've been thinking about a lot, especially as I come to the tail end of this fanfic, that my inspiration is, and my mind is so focused on just getting to the end of this, that I have a hard time starting anything new, whether that's a TV show or something else, because I want to keep my creative well filled with my intention and my own stuff, and not be derailed by I might watch something and be like,
especially since you are at the you're at the conclusional part, and you don't want your pantser brain to be like, oh, but I saw this, let's throw it in here, and then you're like, wait, now I just opened up this whole other can of worms.
Exactly. Which often ends me up in, I go through long periods of time where I don't read at all because I'm trying to get this other project out. And I think you might do a better job at continuing to read while you write than I do. And I was wondering if you had any words of wisdom on how to balance, your reading and your writing goals. Because truly, I am a fan of the fact that to be a good writer, you have to read.
Right.
And
it's true, but I'm actually in a weird hole. I don't know what it is about this 2023. But 2023, I am finding it very difficult. So audiobooks, I was always the type that read an audiobook and a physical book for sure. I usually would finish the audiobook in a week and the physical book within 2 weeks. And then I always had an ebook when I found time to, like at nighttime, that's what I would read if I felt like it. I have mostly read ebooks, which is super strange for me. And it will be like at night and stuff like that, or on a car ride. I did manage to finish, but it's mostly, I can't get into deep fantasy right now. I think it's because I'm so mixed up in mine right now that the few that I have tried have almost like confused. It's almost made me be like, is mine too much like this story, or is my character not good enough because I love this character, you know, like that kind of stuff. Or there was one specific character who I loved, and I was actually on book 3, and I was like, this character is turning whiny and stuff. And I'm like, is my character gonna do that too? Please, no. So I have to step away from the fantasy right now. And I think that's why I'm not reading as much, because that's my go-to. But otherwise, so I'm basically reading like monster romance. That's about it right now. And I think because I have nothing to really connect it to, even though the steampunk is a little bit like, he's got sharp teeth and they're more like mutants, I like to call them, than monsters. And stuff, but I just feel like that's easy to read for me right now. Then, and I guess so. If you want to read like while you're writing, is try to find something that maybe can not take you away from your story, or make you almost be like something that's not going to make you be like, oh, now I want to put something like this in my story, or is mine not good enough because this is so good? That'll make you question your own story. Try and find like almost a different genre. I think when you're deep into it, that would be mine. Now, when you're just starting something, I definitely am the type that, like, say I was to start a mythology book, I want to read all the mythology books before I dive into it. So that would be all I would have to say. And obviously I'm failing right now anyways when it comes to reading. So
there's no failing with reading.
But you have been doing good though. You read one book in like a day, didn't you?
Oh my gosh. Okay. That one took me totally by surprise. But I have been like on the same train of thought as like when you mentioned like when you are first starting out a project or you're in the early stages to read similar, you know, things, whether it's like if you're writing dark, you know, fantasy, read a dark fantasy. And so I have been reading a lot of romance to try and help my fic along the way of just like give me ideas, give me inspiration for, you know, little things. And I had seen that one on TikTok at least a month ago and had like noted that it was coming out soon. And I also, side note, it's just a guilty pleasure of mine that the acronym for the book, They Hate Each Other by Amanda Woody, is Theo, because the characters are so similar to my fanfic boys, and one of them is named Theo. And she did such a great job. Like, it is a YA romance, and it covers so many adult topics. Like, it just doesn't truly feel like a YA other than the characters are young and they have, you know, a lot of heavy burdens and things. But it drew me in so quickly. It was one of those slow burns, and I started at like 9 p.m. Memorial Day, and all of a sudden it was 2 a.m, and I was 60% of the way through, and I was like, I have messed up.
I love that though. I know, I guess, are you one that needs a lot of sleep at night? Are you like strict schedule sleep wise?
That is generally how I function. Lately, however, my creativity has been hitting right when I go to turn my light out. So I have not been getting a lot of sleep, but that's my ideal situation. Yes.
Where I actually feel almost recharged when I only have about 6 hours of sleep. and stuff. I know me and my husband are like complete out. He's like, give me 13 plus hours and he's still drowsy. I'm like, if I get 8 hours, I feel like more than 8 hours. I feel drowsy. So 6 is usually happy. So I often will get caught up. Like when I was on my Ice Planet Barbarian, talk about reading a lot of books in 2 months. I read all those books in 2 months. That's like 22 books.
Whoa.
They're shorter, and you're talking like novellas and stuff too, but they're just so addicting, those guys and talk about those aliens, those barbarians. Talk about like also taking real life issues such as cancer and anxiety, high anxiety stuff, youth, like sexual abuse, like all that. She took these big things and made it such a good, that's what I think people don't understand about Ice Planet Barbarians, is she takes real topics, each one of these girls, and even some of the boys, like one of the boys gets amnesia at one point and stuff, and like it's really just such a good, the way she brings these couples together and how they help each other. And even though there's this thing that's bringing them together, there's this cootie, they like to call it, bringing them together. It was just, it drew me in. And I was like, I think I want to say Ice Planet Barbarians was one that also opened my eyes to be like, I want to write something like, there's such deep connections that I'm like, I want to put this in my fantasies, because there is something so honest and pure about even the sexualness and the falling in love, you know, that kind of stuff. I don't know where I was going. Obviously, I get fogged when it comes to Ice Planet Barbarians, but
you're totally good. I love that so much. And that is, you know, we talked about like what draws you in as a writer to a story, whether it's your characters or your plot first. But for me, when I'm reading, if there's a deep emotional connection, or I can connect deeply with one of the characters, that's what draws me in. It's not the fantasy plot. It's not anything else. It's like I will sit through pretty much anything if I can connect deeply with your main character.
Right.
That's my thing.
Same. Well, and I think that's also why a lot of people like the ACOTAR series, because it's not just, I mean, obviously Reese and Farah are great, but the whole cast, there's so much there's so much depth within each of those characters. And I can say the same with like George R.R. Martin. I think I talked about that a lot. He's somebody I inspire to write, because his characters, whether you love them, you hate them, they're have the incest, they whatever, they're like, there's so much depth to these characters that he makes you believe like, well, that works for them, you know, like of course this is, he makes it seem like it just is their way of life, like he does that so well. And SJM does that really well, JLA does that really well too, with characters, and definitely makes you feel like they're real and have that connection and stuff.
That fully immersive experience. Exactly.
Yeah. Who are some of your authors and that really inspire you? Do you have specific authors?
Yes. I would say definitely Sarah J. Maas is one of the top. I think especially book 2 of the ACOTAR series, A Court of, was it Mist and Fury? I don't think I had ever, I think it was one of the first things I'd come across where I feel like a lot of the times when there's a series of novels and a main character goes through something really traumatic in the first one, it's kind of like a sitcom where everything resets at the next book, and they don't really carry over the trauma, they don't really carry over anything else. And it was so eye-opening for me to see, like, to have Farah go through that PTSD and to like have to go through a healing journey. And I think at the time I picked it up, I was also going through a different challenging time in my life, and I related so hard to what Farah was going through, and was just like, this is so fascinating to feel validated by a book that is mainstream and it has fantasy elements, but to also like to see this character who you know, has everything else going for her, but still has to heal and has to go through the same process that we all do as humans. And I think that's so like that process in itself is, I think, what really hooked me to ACOTAR.
Yeah.
Very, very deeply. I think one of the authors that I absolutely adore just for her genuine writing style is I think it's Audrey Niffenegger, who wrote The Time
Okay.
Traveler's Wife. I listened to that
Oh,
audiobook
yeah.
to and from college, and she just
Mhm.
has such a beautiful way of describing everyday things. It is
Yeah.
gorgeous.
I read that. You said A Time Traveler's Wife?
Yeah, The Time Traveler's Wife.
Yeah. So I remember reading that one too. And I feel like I read that one when I was like on maternity leave with my first or something like that. And then the movie came out and stuff.
The movie butchered it.
I know. It was so, they took away that depth kind of. It was very almost boring. Like they made it that way.
It
It was
was. And
slow.
did you see there was HBO attempted an adaptation and they only got one season into it before they got canceled?
I did not try it. Oh yeah, because it was the girl from Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones or not, but it's Jon Snow.
I watched a little bit of it. Yes, yeah, I recognize her definitely.
Yeah.
In it, and they did an okay job, but they definitely still took their own creative liberties with it. That I was like, that's not how that happened in the book. And
right,
you know, when you have a series like that, why not just stick to the original book if you're
and
able to? But
yeah, and some books are just so magical or so unique that they just can't be reached on the screen. You know, it will never do it justice. It's something about, like you said, the wording. Yeah.
And I'm so worried that ACOTAR is going to be the same way, that like it's this fantastic thing that we all adore, but once they put it on the screen, it's just not going to meet it's not going to live up to our expectations of the movie we've created in our own minds. It's just
and there's just so much with it too. It's kind of like, how are they going to do this? Well, and you haven't read From Blood and Ash series yet?
Not yet.
That one is, I'm pretty sure, it's going to be on Prime Video. So that one's getting there's so much to that one that I'm like, they're either going to totally rock it or they're going to totally destroy my dreams. Especially Castile. Oh yeah, because I talked about Castile. Yeah, he's like
that's right.
Dreamboat. Yeah.
I think you tagged me in a video and I'm like, I might bump that up a few on my TBR.
Talk about a good audiobook. That's very good audiobooks. Yeah.
That's great to know, because I'm actually about to start looking for a new audiobook because I'm going to start hiking soon. So that is great.
That's a good one, especially because they're thick books and so they're long. So if you're taking them on your hikes, then that's a perfect companion.
Perfect. I love that. Excellent.
Yeah, and JLA is very inspiring to me. And she is I don't know, have you really read any of her books, Jennifer Armentrout?
No, I don't think so.
So if the way that you describe like your sci-fi a little bit, even though hers is more, so this is the Lux series, highly recommend. That's the one that really got me on, like started with her. That's more of, it's like sci-fi, but it's like now it's in modern, it's in our, almost like Roswell. Do you remember that show kind of thing where the aliens are here on Earth kind of a thing, you know, that stuff. And then there's like agencies and all that. But what she does, and I have never really seen another author ever do it the way she does. Every single series that she has a spinoff series.
Oh.
And so like the Lux series, if Stacey was here, she'd be able to tell you, I think but so it's like one character that then will have their own series and stuff.
Gotcha.
And so then when it comes to From Blood and Ash, that series, then you've got, it's almost like I haven't read them yet, but it's like, I think it's the main girl Poppy's like ancestors. So that's the other storyline and stuff. So it's people that you hear about and you almost feel like you get to know, even though they're not a part of the book. And she creates their story. She's so good at that. It's amazing.
I love that. you were saying that, and I was just thinking that another one that popped up on my list recently was I recently discovered Brandon Sanderson. I know that he has some like older sci-fi and fantasy things, they've been around for ages, but I ended up reading Skyward, I believe it is, by him. And it was, I say reading, I listened to it on a hike last summer, and it is like a book 1 of 4, and I wasn't as impressed with books 2 and 3, but book 1 had me in a chokehold. He wrote it so well, and it was such a great mixture of like, he played with the emotions, and the plot was also brilliant, but then it made you laugh so hard. I had to like stop hiking at times to like laugh and to take a breath.
That's on my TBR. I haven't, it's on my shelves in the other room. Book 1 and 2. I think I have book 1 and 2. But I haven't the only one that I've read of his is Mistborn, which was really good. I
think that's the most popular.
Like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I picked up Skyward because I was looking for comparative titles for Library of Souls. And I was like, oh, maybe this would fit that description. And I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. And I just absolutely fell in love with the story and the way he brings a world to life. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Throw this book out here too, because it is a very underrated. It's The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. Such a good series. I mean, it will destroy you. Book 2 you better have book 3 on hand because it will destroy you. But it's so good. So basically you're talking a sci-fi where the Diabolic it's been so long since I read it now. They're like supposed to not have emotions and stuff. They're like almost like the maidens to people and like that kind of stuff. But then she ends up being the main character and goes through, talk about almost like what Farah goes through. And then but it's almost more Cruel Prince style because the love interest person he's kind of like a bad character for a while, but then they have this connection, and then I highly recommend that. And I know there's quite a few people on Bookstagram who would back me up that we just like bark about it all the time. Like, just read the book, read the series. It needs to be, because I want to say this is older now. I know Nemesis, which is book 3, came out when I started Bookstagram, which would have been almost 3 years ago. So I don't know when book 1 came out, but I kind of picked it up on a whim and I could not put them down. They're amazing books. So
I love that. I'm definitely adding this to my TBR.
Yeah. Anyways, I was just thinking of like inspiration for your Library of Souls. I think that one could even too, because you're talking out, spaceships, outer space, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But that was my bookish rant there. Otherwise, do you have any other stuff? I don't want to cut it. We're going on an hour and a half. Don't want to cut it off, but if you're getting tired, then we can call it good. If you're feeling good.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Did you have any questions for me or anything that we didn't touch on?
I think I got through all of them because I got the fanfic. We talked about NaNo. I think the only thing I didn't maybe cover is at the top, I did ask what was your favorite part. Do you like the editing, the drafting, or the formatting the best? Like, what is your favorite thing?
Is writing an option?
Yeah, just writing. I always just like feel like that's drafting, that's your creativity, that's your flow, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think for the most part, I would say drafting is probably my favorite. Is just like getting the words down on the page and like letting your character kind of go.
And obviously you're very good at it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't know if I can claim that just yet. I think I put words down. I'm not sure they're great words.
I mean, at least you're very good. I guess I could even rephrase that. You are very good at getting your ideas, not getting stuck in your own head. You're very good. We could talk even forward writing. You've almost mastered that.
Which is such a turn of events, because I used to be that person that like George R. R. Martin and Stephen King, I think, have had this conversation before of like, George R. R. Martin looks at Stephen King and goes, how do you write so many books? And
you don't just sit there and nothing comes out.
Yeah. He's like, you don't obsess over one sentence for months on end.
I'm glad you've watched their interview, because that interview is epic. I love it.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm obligated because George R. R. Martin lives an hour from me.
I know. So. Lucky you.
I have yet to run into him, but I keep it in mind every time I go up to Santa Fe. I'm like, oh, maybe
you better snap a picture if you ever do and send it to me immediately.
I will. I'll probably find some napkin and be like, can I have your autograph, please? And so, I definitely... I have been through times in my life where I was more George R. R. Martin style, where like, oh my God, this sentence has to be perfect, because I am innately a type A perfectionist human being who, like, I think, I have a whole page of notes just for, coming on and talking to you. And I am always over-prepared and overthinking things. And I think NaNo actually was the one that helped me kind of get over that.
You kind of have to. Yeah.
You kind of have to. And then also just the fact that like I came into this, A Bound in Bleeding Heart, I called it Emma's story for the longest time because I didn't have a title for it. I came into Emma's story just kind of being like, let's see what happens. No pressure. And I came up with this phrase that I'm sure I'm not the one who originated this phrase, but the thing I tell myself all the time is just that there are no wrong answers.
Right.
And especially in drafting, if you can just say, who cares if you write a fight scene and you end up having to revise it and you rewrite it the next day.
Right.
Oh, well.
At least it's out.
Wrote. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if you end up having to write multiple versions of something or something like that, you're still
even
moving
if
forward.
Right. Even if, like, when I think about forward writing, there's so many times where I will get out 1,500 words. Even if 1,000 of that ends up jumbled, most of it I redo, take out, whatever. At least the premise is there, and it's not just staring at a blank space when you come back. It's absolutely out there, and even because then you can think about, like, when you walk away, you can think about what you wrote then, and you can be like, okay, I love that I put this out here. That's perfect, but this does need work and help.
Yes,
because there's so much that sprinting is obviously, I've always tried to preach, like, because it has helped me so much, sprints. Yeah. That's where you really do just sit down for a half hour and forward write and see where it takes you. Do not hit backspace. Do not just keep going. That's always, it's helped me. It is a tremendous helped me. Yeah.
I am fully on board with all of that. I totally agree. I personally get really distracted really easily. So having a sprint where I like hide my phone somewhere else, or like only focus on something, on the task at hand, I think that's incredibly helpful. And there have been times, especially in NaNoWriMo, where the scene that Kate was logically supposed to come next, I couldn't write, but I could write the spicy scene that was supposed to come 3 chapters later. Yep. So I would, get that down. And I think that, and even if you end up writing something where, you have to revise it or you have to write a different version of it, the version that you wrote still taught you something about your characters.
You
still learned something.
Your characters were still there to grow and be and become who they should be, but maybe their storyline needs to change.
Absolutely.
Like that's how I always look at it, because I don't even know anymore, but at least 10 projects that I've written over the last 6 years, 8 years, whatever. I'm so thankful that I have kept those, even though a lot of them, the way I write now has matured.
Yeah.
And stuff. But I'm glad that I have those, because it's like, talk about an outline almost, like it's a shell of an idea, and those characters have developed and have always stuck with me still. There's so many of them that I still think about, and I'm like, don't worry, I'll get to your story. Like, you're still around for a reason, like that kind of thing. And
I love that.
I think I've always kept him around because of, like I said, the maturity. My writing needed to mature. The forward writing needed to become a pattern in my life. And now I can start going back into those other stories eventually. And
yeah. I'm fully on board with that. The thing I will add to, like, one of the, two other things to add to that really helped me get through NaNoWriMo and just kind of helped my drafts in general, and to get around that, like, my perfectionism tendencies, is I don't delete anything. If I think that a line might be good or whatever, and I am, terrified of deleting it, I have an extras draft, an extra Word doc for every single thing I write. And I think I actually looked at the fanfic extra draft the other day, and it is up to 18,000 words at this point.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I'll throw plot lines in there or something I don't want to forget, notes for myself, or just sections that I'm like, this didn't quite fit, I'm going to throw it over here instead of hitting delete. And there's something,
we're very similar in that, because I do that same thing. And do you call it like whatever your like fanfic and then just put extra scene? Yeah, I do that all the time, so I can go to it easily and be like, this is what, because when it comes to the romantasy, so I had that one draft, but I also had the extras and stuff. And there's a part where I completely pulled. I knew it wasn't in the first draft. It was in the extras and never made it into that first draft. Ooh. But I pulled it in, and it's where it's that really angsty scene between Bram and Wraith. And it just exploded out of me. And it was where I realized, like, it was almost where the why choose the thing. I was like, there's so much more to these two, There was a reason. Yeah. And so I love that I feel like that's important to have an extras draft, or like, I'll even, if it doesn't make it over to the extra drafts, do you do where, say you finished a scene and you write like almost like in quotations, like a little paragraph that says where you want to build on this kind of a thing. When you come back.
You read my mind, because that was my second thing.
Okay.
I call them my anchors. So, and I haven't been doing it so much with the fanfic, but definitely when I was writing A Bound and Bleeding Heart during NaNo, when I was like writing every single spare second that I had, I would, exactly that, parentheses. And especially if I had to leave in the middle of writing a scene, I would leave myself, and then Emma does da 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 da.
Right. Don't forget, this is where you want it to go. Like that.
Especially if I had a vibe in mind, I'd write down, the vibe is this, or this needs to happen, or this is the tone of the scene.
Or like, do you kind of start them off sometimes where it's like you end a chapter and then you're like, what if in the next chapter, like you kind of know what you want from the next chapter, but you're like, what if we throw this in? So then you can come back and think about it before you sit down and really dive into that chapter.
Ooh. Yes, I've definitely done that before, because I think I'm constantly I'm like, I have a dog, so I walk him all the time. I work from home, and whenever I'm on walks and I'm listening to music, I'm always thinking about, okay, what's the next scene and what do I want to have happen in that? So then I'll take those anchors and I'll use that as like, creative fuel for that, for sure.
Like catalyst. Yeah, that's awesome. Same. We're very similar in that train of thought. I like that.
No wonder we've been friends for this long.
I know, but it's so funny. It is true. And I think that's why we kind of feed off of each other. Like, our personalities are very different, but I think in the way our creativity flows, it's very similar. And I think that's why, and what I appreciate about you too, is that even when I first was throwing stuff at you or asking, hey, you want to look at this, or you would do the same to me, I think I appreciated the most that it wasn't always just like, oh, this is great. Oh yeah, I love that. Like, obviously you say that, and like I said, you and Stacy, forever my hype girls. But I appreciate that you would be like, maybe change this. Like, because that's what you need. You need almost like a critique person and stuff. Absolutely. And even though it's only like little segments and stuff, it's so appreciated. I have very much thank you for that.
Of course. I'm always happy to help. And I know that I think you'd asked me, and I think I got off on a total tangent. You'd asked me what my favorite part of the process was of drafting or editing. And I will say I am an editor at heart. So, I edited my college, newspaper, and I have done a ton of different things, and I've got different qualifications and whatnot. And my kind of day job, I'm partly an editor. So my brain definitely has like, there's the creative side, and then there's the like hardcore editor side that I'm very passionate about, where I really understand sentence structure and different, the other aspects to it that I have to turn that off when I write. But then once I have words on the page, I do also find joy in refining that and like bringing that editor side of me to life. And I think it's a joy of mine to be able to like bring those tools and help other people as well. Yeah. And so I love being able to be like, yes, totally, try this though, and I might just come across a little bit better. So that is 100% a joy of mine, and I'm happy to do it.
I do. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that mindset. And like I said, I appreciate that you never stuttered about it. Like you weren't like, well, we don't really know each other, so like you didn't want to step on my toes or whatever. You just like dove into it, and I think that also helped build a connection between you and I. Because we both are very similar in that. Like it's a way of being like, I absolutely love this, is all perfect, this is so great, I'm loving, but like here's my thoughts on this, but we know that that's part of it, and it's so needed and stuff. So thank you for that. And I agree too that the editing can be fun, as overwhelming and as much of a headache as it can be. It is fun because, especially if you have stepped away for a while from your project and then you come back to it and dive into the edits, it's almost like reading your favorite book, but also getting to tweak it, like that kind of stuff.
I fully agree with that. And I think that's the pitfall I fell into with Abandoned Bleeding Heart, is I tried to come back to it too soon. And I, even in just printing out, so I have a printed copy like sitting behind me here, in a very nice little binder, that even just printing it out and like skimming some of the pages while I was waiting for my printer to catch up was just like, oh my gosh, I really am in love with this. And it's exactly that feeling you were
and I'm sure I've printed out before too, and there is something, it feels more bookish, and so it does almost make you have this deeper connection, and you're like, now I really do want to read and go in and highlight whatever and put little notes here and stuff.
Although I have to say, me printing it out was fully because I know that I have zero self-control when it comes to editing. So if I can make an edit in real time, I will do it. And I think that's the pitfall. Like, I have spent close to 10 years editing and revising Library of Souls because I never did a developmental edit and then the small edits. I was always doing the little edits and then the big edits on top of themselves. And then I would have to delete huge sections that I'd already edited. And it was so disheartening. And like, I had to keep restarting and everything. Whereas I think this is my first attempt at like doing this, in maybe the order it should be done. Which is, the developmental edit first, for the reason that, you don't have to scrap the hard work you've already done. And I know that if I read it on my laptop, I will not be able to stop myself. Editing.
Right.
So that was.
It's just so easy to hit backspace or start typing again and stuff. Yeah, I get that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think we covered everything. We're going on almost we're like an hour and 50 minutes. So I think we've talked, I might even split this into two. We've had to do that.
This could be 2 episodes.
We've had to do that once before, which was great. It just gives you more content and stuff. So I appreciate it. This was fun.
Thank you so much for having me. And I would be happy to come back anytime you want.
You've got to when Stacy's back. That will be so much fun. And I'm sure she's so good at picking brains. So she would probably love that. So we will definitely have to have you back on. Maybe even after you go through these developmental editing and that kind of stuff and get further into your querying, that would be fun to kind of
definitely
dive into that.
Fantastic.
Well, you have a good rest of your night.
Thank you. You too.
Think I'm going to go play some Sims. So.
Oh, that sounds fun. I'm gonna go play some Legend of Zelda, I think.
Oh, perfect. Yep, perfect. Go veg out with some video games.
Awesome.
All right.
Have a great rest of your night.
Yes, you too. See ya.
Bye.